Adrian's point of view.
It had been hours. Hours since I made the hardest, most logical, and potentially most disastrous decision of my life. Sending Liyah away. Leaving her to Alex. Intellectually, I knew it was the right move, when Dante and his warriors had shown up at my house posturing and demanding the healer. The threat was palpable. My pack is strong or weak because of me, but we aren't built for war the way Alex's is. His territory is a fortress. His wolves are soldiers. If anyone could keep her safe from the council's hounds, it was my brother. But emotionally, it felt like I had taken my own heart out of my chest and handed it to the one person who could crush it without even trying. I stopped at the window, staring out into the gathering darkness, seeing nothing. The silence from my phone was deafening. Why hadn't they called? Had they arrived? Was she safe? My mind, left unchecked in the silence, began to eat itself alive. Terrifying, treacherous scenarios played on a loop behind my eyes. I pictured them in Alex's bedroom, just the two of them, isolated from the world. I imagined the tension I always felt around Liyah, that pull, that undeniable spark, and multiplied it by Alex's raw, overwhelming intensity. Was she smiling at him right now? A real smile, the kind that reached her eyes, the kind I felt like I had to earn, but that seemed to come so easily around him. A sick feeling curled in my gut, a poisonous mix of jealousy and inadequacy. I hated myself for thinking it, but the evidence had been there from the beginning, hadn't it? The way she'd relax just a fraction whenever Alex stepped between her and danger. The way her eyes tracked him. She was grateful to me, yes. She trusted me. But with Alex, it was different. It was primal. Was she more comfortable there in his fortress of stone and silence than she ever was here in my more open home? Did his rough edges make her feel safer than my carefully constructed calm? The thought was unbearable. It felt like I was losing a race I didn't even know I was running until it was too late. Damn it, I snarled, spinning away from the window. I couldn't take this anymore. The waiting, the wondering, the slow drip poison of my own insecurity. Logic be damned, protocol be damned. If I stayed in this room for another minute, I was going to tear the walls down. I strode to the closet and snatched my leather jacket off the hanger, shrugging into it in one fluid motion. The decision crystallized instantly. I was going to Alex's. I needed to see her. I needed to make sure she was safe. And God help me, I needed to make sure she was still mine. I didn't bother notifying anyone. I just headed for the door, my hand closing around the knob with bruising force. I yanked it open, ready to storm out into the night, and stopped dead in my tracks. Denise was standing right outside my door. She didn't look surprised to see me. She stood with her arms folded tightly across her chest, leaning slightly against the doorframe, her expression an immovable mask of disapproval. She was the council head's daughter, and right now, she looked every inch the part, a roadblock made of bureaucracy and stubbornness. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. She was the absolute last person I wanted to deal with right now. Move, Denise, I growled, not bothering with pleasantries. I tried to brush past her, to step around the obstacle she presented. She didn't budge. She simply shifted her weight, planting herself firmly in my path, blocking the hallway. Her eyes were hard, unimpressed by my alpha tone. "Going somewhere, Adrian?" she asked, her voice cool and clipped. "Because it looks like you're about to abandon your pack in the middle of a crisis." The air in the hallway thickened instantly, charged with the storm energy that always simmered just beneath my skin. "Move," I snarled, my voice dropping an octave into a warning growl that would make any lesser wolf show their throat. Denise didn't flinch. She just stood there in her calculated pose, arms crossed over her chest, her pale blue eyes cool and assessing. There was no fear in her gaze, only that maddening, entitled confidence she wore like armor. She looked at me not as her alpha, but as a possession that was currently misbehaving. "A crisis?" I echoed, taking a step right into her personal space, looming over her. My patience, already non-existent, evaporated completely. "The crisis is that Dante is hunting the woman I intend to claim, and I haven't heard a word from my brother in hours. Now get out of my way before I move you myself." Her expression didn't shift, but her scent spiked with something sharp and bitter, not fear but resentment. "That woman," she said, the words tasting sour in the air between us, "is causing chaos, Adrian. You sent her away for the good of the pack. Why undo that now by running after her like a lovesick puppy? It's beneath you." My jaw worked. The urge to physically shove her aside was becoming overwhelming. "You don't get to talk about her," I said, my voice dangerously low, "and you don't get to tell me what's beneath me. My duty is to protect what's mine, and Liyah is mine." The word mine hit her like a physical slap. Her perfectly controlled mask cracked for a fraction of a second, her eyes narrowing into venomous slits. This was Denise's core delusion. That tradition trumped fate, that her persistence could rewrite the instinct that roared in my blood whenever Liyah was near. She took a half step forward, invading my space now, but not close enough to touch, tilting her head back to look me in the eye. A sickly sweet, polite smile touched her lips, but her eyes were ice cold. "Is she?" Denise murmured, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper designed to needle my deepest insecurities. "You seem so sure, Adrian, but you left her to Alex, to the quiet one, the gentle one." She paused, letting the venom sink in. "Maybe she likes that better. Maybe she prefers a protector who doesn't suck the air out of the room every time he walks in. Have you considered that maybe she's safer there, happier there than she ever would be with your intensity?" A roar ripped from my chest. It was pure, unthinking reaction. I slammed my hand against the wall right next to her head with enough force to crack the plaster. The sound was like a gunshot in the narrow hallway. Denise did gasp. She didn't cower. She just looked up at me, her eyes glittering with a twisted sort of satisfaction that I was this close, this worked up. "Don't you ever," I breathed, my face inches from hers, fighting the urge to shift right there and then, "try to poison me against my own brother or her. You know nothing about what I feel, nothing." She reached up slowly, deliberately, and pointed a finger against the center of my chest, right over my pounding heart. It felt like a brand, a claim I had never agreed to. "I know you're hurting," she said, her voice smoothing out into a parody of comfort. "I know you're confused by this mistake that wandered into our lives. Let me help you fix it. Stay here, Adrian. Be the alpha this pack needs, with the partner you know you were meant to have." Even the thought of her touching me made my skin crawl. The sheer entitlement of it, the idea that she could just erase Liyah and slot herself into that space because she wanted it enough, was repulsive. I recoiled violently, knocking her hand away with a snarl. "You are delusional, Denise," I spat, disgusted. "There is no us, there never will be." I didn't wait for a response. I didn't care about being polite or gentle. I walked past her hard, knocking her back against the opposite wall without a backward glance. I strode down the hall toward the stairs, my blood boiling, my wolf pacing furiously inside me. Denise's poison was already working despite my denial. Her words echoed in my head, feeding the monster of my jealousy. Maybe she prefers quiet. And underneath the jealousy, my skin crawled. The spot on my chest where Denise had placed her hand felt scorched, a lingering repulsive sensation like oily sludge beneath my shirt. I hated being touched. It was a violent, visceral aversion that had plagued me for years, a physical rejection of anyone who wasn't my twin. Until Liyah. I was taking the stairs 2 at a time, ready to tear the front door off its hinges and sprint all the way to Alex's territory if I had to. I reached the bottom step just as the front door swung open. I stopped short, the growl dying in my throat. Liyah stood there. She looked pale, her eyes wide and searching, Alex's jacket slightly too big for her frame. Behind her, filling the doorway with quiet menace, was Alex, and behind him Theo. For a fraction of a second, relief so potent it nearly brought me to my knees washed over me. She was alive, she was here. Then the scent hit me. Beneath the intoxicating smell of wildflowers that was uniquely hers, there was fear. And on Alex, blood, fresh metallic enemy blood. My wolf roared. Instinct took over completely. I didn't think, I moved. I crossed the few feet between us in a blur and grabbed Liyah's hand. The moment my skin touched hers, the crawling sensation left by Denise vanished, replaced by a jolt of pure, grounding electricity. It was right. It was necessary. I yanked her toward me, perhaps a little too roughly, pulling her out of the doorway and against my side, tucking her under my arm. It was a possessive claim, loud and undeniable, right in front of my brother, my eyes locked fiercely onto Alex over the top of her head. "What the hell are you doing here?" I barked, the words tearing from my chest. My heart was hammering against Liyah's shoulder. "I told you Dante was threatening this place. I left her to you for safety, Alex, not for you to bring her straight back into the fire." Alex didn't flinch at my tone. He stepped inside, closing the door behind Theo, his expression grim and unreadable, though his eyes flickered briefly to where my arm was wrapped tight around Liyah. "We didn't have a choice, Adrian," Alex said, his voice low, that quiet intensity of his filling the space more effectively than my shouting. "Dante and 20 of his wolves ambushed us on the border road." My grip on Liyah tightened painfully. "What?" "It's handled," Alex said briefly, the scent of violence rolling off him confirming the understatement. "But they were waiting for us. Going forward wasn't an option. Coming back here was the only immediate move." Before I could explode again at the thought of her being in the middle of a war zone, Liyah shifted against me. She pulled back just enough to look up into my face, her eyes swimming with worry. "Adrian?" she said breathlessly, reaching up with her free hand to touch my chest, right near where Denise had nearly touched me moments ago. Again, her touch was balm to a burn I didn't know I had. "What happened to you? Are you hurt?" I blinked down at her, the rage momentarily derailed by her genuine distress. "Hurt? No, I'm fine. Why?" Her brows drew together. "My birthmark," she whispered, glancing down at her shoulder. "It started pulsing hard. It was painful, urgent. We thought something terrible was happening to you, that you were in danger." The air rushed out of my lungs. "She came back for me." Denise's poisonous whispers, "Maybe she prefers him," suddenly sounded faint. Liyah had felt my distress, my spiraling panic, and she had turned around into danger because she thought I needed her. A savage surge of validation twisted in my gut. She felt me. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said, my voice roughening, loosening my grip just enough so I wasn't crushing her. "I was just worried about you. I'm okay." "Yes, he's perfectly fine." A smooth, icy voice cut in from the stairs. I froze. Denise was descending the staircase slowly, regal and composed, as if I hadn't just shoved her into a wall 5 minutes ago. Her eyes were fixed laser-tight on Liyah. "In fact," Denise continued, her tone dripping with faux sweetness, "better than fine, I'd say." She reached the bottom step and held up her right hand, wiggling her index finger slightly. It was slightly red. "He was so passionate just now upstairs. Denise lied, her eyes glittering dangerously. He slapped my hand away, but he made contact, skin to skin. She looked directly at Liyah, delivering the killing blow with a smile. And look at him, no recoil, no sickness. He touched me and he's perfectly fine. That's a very good sign for us, don't you think, Adrian? My blood ran cold, then instantly boiled over into molten fury. It was a masterstroke of manipulation, using my known weakness, my aversion to touch, to imply an intimacy that made my stomach turn. You lying bitch, I snarled, stepping away from Liyah to confront Denise, my hands curling into fists at my sides. The absence of Liyah's warmth against my side was immediate and painful. I shoved you because you touched me and it made my skin crawl. Don't twist this. Denise just raised an eyebrow, looking past me to Liyah. Did it? You seemed fine when your skin brushed mine. I turned back to Liyah, desperate to see that she didn't believe this garbage. But Liyah was staring at Denise's finger, then at me. The concern in her eyes had curdled into confusion and a flicker of hurt that pierced me deeper than any wolf's claws. You touched her? Liyah asked quietly. And it didn't hurt you? Liyah, no, I pleaded, stepping toward her, reaching for her again, but she took a small, instinctive step back toward Alex. That small retreat felt like a dagger in my chest. She's lying. I can't stand her touch. Only you. You know that, only you and Alex. Denise laughed softly. Denial is an ugly look on you, Alpha. The healer doesn't need to be confused by your mixed signals. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I stood there, my hand outstretched toward Liyah, frozen by her small step backward and the hurt in her eyes. Denise's poisonous implication hung in the silence, a thick, suffocating fog. But then Liyah did something that completely threw me. A small, fragile smile touched her lips. It wasn't happy exactly, but it was gentle. Don't get me wrong, Adrian, she said softly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. I am happy to hear that. If you touched her and you're okay, that's a very good sign. It means you're healing, that your condition is improving. My jaw dropped. Healing? Improving? It took my brain a second to catch up. She wasn't jealous. She wasn't thinking what Denise wanted her to think, that I had some secret connection with my rejected mate. She thought my lifelong physical aversion was being cured. A wave of relief so intense it made my knees weak washed over me, followed instantly by a surge of fierce affection for this incredible, untainted woman. She didn't jump to the ugly conclusion. She looked for the light. Liyah, I started, taking another step toward her, needing to explain, to make her understand that it wasn't healing, it was just repulsion. It's not, but she had already turned away from me. She looked up at Alex, her head tilting back to meet his gaze, and just like that, the jealousy that had been momentarily stunned by her grace came roaring back, sharper than ever. The way she looked at him, like he held the answers to the universe in his silent eyes, burned me. My teeth clenched so hard I heard them grind. Look at me, I wanted to shout. I'm the one you came back for. I'm the one standing here bleeding internally for you. Are we going back? She asked Alex, her voice sounding small in the tense hallway. Or stay? Alex's eyes were dark, unreadable as he looked down at her. Staying, I answered curtly. But Liyah didn't move. She didn't accept the order. She kept looking up at him, her brow furrowed slightly as if searching his face for something beyond the words. Confirmation, reassurance, the truth of the danger. Alex let out a slow exhale. He tore his gaze from her, looking over her head at me with a grim expression that communicated 1,000 threats, before looking back down at her. We can't risk you on the road again right now, he told her, his voice low and gentle in a way he rarely used with anyone else. We don't know how many more are out there waiting. Liyah absorbed this, a subtle tension leaving her shoulders. She nodded slowly. Okay. She turned slightly, looking toward the stairs. I'll head into my room. She paused, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. Wait. I don't have a room here. You can have mine, I blurted out instantly, stepping forward again. The need to provide for her, to shelter her in my space, was primal. Take my room, Alex said at the exact same second, his voice flat, cutting over mine. Liyah stopped, looking between us. The air cracked with sudden, violent tension as Alex and I locked eyes over her head. The challenge was unspoken but deafening. Liyah's gaze darted from me to Alex and then, unfortunately, to Denise. Denise was watching the scene with a look of smug, calculated amusement, like a cat watching two mice fight over a crumb. It was a look that said, "See? Chaos." Liyah seemed to shrink a little under that gaze. "No," Liyah said quickly, shaking her head. "It's okay, I don't want to put anyone out. I'll just sleep in one of the girls' rooms, Zoe's maybe, if that's all right." Without waiting for an answer, she turned and started down the hallway, her posture rigid. Denise gave a soft chuckle, the sound like glass breaking. "Well, this is going to be interesting," she murmured, then turned and followed, headed up the stairs, her hips swaying with victory. Theo, wisely sensing the imminent explosion, melted away into the shadows toward the kitchen. The front door clicked shut. Alex and I were alone in the hallway. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, thick with the scent of old rivalry and new blood. I could feel the heat radiating off him, a mirror image of my own volatile energy. We stared at each other, two alphas, two brothers poised on the edge of a violence we hadn't felt toward each other since we were pups. Finally, Alex broke the silence. His voice was lethal in its quietness. "Is it true?" he asked, his eyes hard as flint. "Did you touch Denise? Are you healing?" Alex's question hung in the air like a drawn blade. "Is it true? Did you touch her? Are you healing?" The memory flashed through my mind. The revulsion had been there, potent and visceral, but it hadn't been the crippling, nauseating physical reaction I was used to. It hadn't felt like my skin was being flayed open. It had been manageable. And when I had knocked her hand away, when our skin had connected for that split second, there had been no recoil, no electric shock of wrongness. I had touched her and I was fine. My blood ran cold. It was true, something had changed. But I would be damned if I admitted that to Alex. Admitting that my condition was improving, that I could potentially handle physical contact with someone other than Liyah, would give him hope. Hope that he could have her. And that hope was a flame I intended to snuff out. "My condition is none of your damn business," I snarled, stepping closer, the growl rumbling deep in my chest. "But yours is. I've seen the way you look at her, Alex." I let the jealousy I'd been nursing all night bubble to the surface. "Like you're a starving wolf and she's the only prey for miles. I've seen it more than once. That hungry, quiet, possessive look." I took another step, forcing him to hold his ground or back down. "I hope to the moon goddess it's not what I think it is, because if you think it is," Alex cut in, his voice still terrifyingly quiet. The world stopped. "What?" I breathed. "It is what you think it is," he said, his eyes locking with mine, not a flicker of doubt or hesitation in them. "I have feelings for her, Adrian. It's not just the wolf, it's me. I want her." The confession hit me like a physical blow. He wanted her. My brother, my twin, the only person in the world I truly trusted. A white-hot, blinding rage exploded behind my eyes. It wasn't just jealousy, it was betrayal. It was the shattering of the one unspoken rule of our bond. "You bastard!" I didn't think. I just reacted. My fist connected with his jaw with a sickening crack. It was a full-force blow fueled by every agonizing second of watching them together. Every whisper of Denise's poison. Alex stumbled back a step, his head snapping to the side. He let out a low, pained groan, but he didn't fall. He slowly raised his hand and wiped a trickle of blood from the corner of his mouth. He looked at the crimson stain on his fingers, then back up at me, his expression unyielding. "I told you she was mine," I roared, shaking with the force of my fury. "Mine! I claimed her first." "It's not what I wanted, Adrian," Alex said, his voice sounding weary but his gaze unwavering. "It's not what I thought this would be, but it's what it is. We can't fight fate." He paused, taking a slow breath. The moon goddess. I never believed. But she mated us both to the same woman. We can't change that. It's her choice. It will always be her choice. Her choice. The words were gasoline on the fire of my possessiveness. My wolf was howling, frantic and murderous. "Her choice," I spat, my voice cracking. "She's mine by right. I'm the one who needs her. I'm the one who can—" "Cool your temper, Adrian," Alex barked, his voice suddenly thundering in the small hallway, an alpha command mixed with a brother's desperation. The sound of his voice, so like my own but with an authority I wasn't used to hearing directed at me, snapped something inside me. I froze for a split second. Alex took that second a step forward, closing the distance I'd created. "How are you supposed to protect her?" he demanded, his voice dropping, filled with a cold, terrifying logic. "How? When you can't even protect yourself, when you spend your life hiding in your room because you're afraid of the world touching you." The words were a precise surgical strike at my deepest insecurity. They were true, and because they were true, they were unforgivable. I saw red, pure, unadulterated red. I threw another punch, aiming for his face again, putting every ounce of my rage and shame into it. But this time Alex was ready. He blocked it, his forearm deflecting my fist with rock-hard strength. Before I could recover, his own fist connected with my chest, a powerful, punishing blow that knocked the air from my lungs and sent me stumbling backward. I crashed against the wall, gasping, the rage transforming into a primal, instinctual need for violence. My bones began to crack and shift. Fur erupted along my arms, my face elongating into a snarl. Alex didn't back down. He stepped toward me as I half-shifted, his eyes glowing with their own fierce light. "How do you plan to protect her, Adrian?" he shouted over the sound of my bones snapping. "Or your pack, against threats like Dante? If it wasn't for Denise tonight, Dante and his wolves would have torn through this house while you were cowering behind a locked door." The accusation was too much. The truth of it, the shame of it, was unbearable. My shift completed in a rush of power and pain. I was no longer Adrian. I was a monstrous wolf, a creature of pure fury and possessiveness. I roared, a sound that shook the floor, and charged. I slammed into Alex with the force of a battering ram, driving him backward until his body hit the heavy oak front door with a deafening crash. He grunted, but he didn't stay down. In a blur of motion, he shifted too. A second later, his wolf stood before me, a mirror image of my own power, but with eyes that burned with a colder, steadier fire. We faced each other, snouts inches apart, growling low in our throats. The air crackled with the impossible energy of two alpha wolves, twin brothers, about to tear each other apart over the same woman. The world narrowed to the scent of my brother, an intoxicating mix of familiar kinship and raw, burning rivalry, and the sight of his massive wolf form blocking my path. I didn't hesitate. I launched myself at him. We met in the center of the hallway with a collision that shook the foundations of the house. Teeth snapped, claws scrabbled against hardwood, and roars tore from our throats. Even in the haze of my fury, I knew he was holding back. When my jaws snapped toward his shoulder, he didn't counter with a killing bite to my throat. He shoved me away with a massive shoulder check. When I raked my claws across his flank, drawing first blood, he didn't retaliate with equal force. He swiped at my muzzle, a warning blow rather than a crippling one. His restraint didn't calm me. It enraged me further. It was the ultimate condescension, the stronger brother taking pity on the broken one. We grappled, hind legs churning for purchase, locked in a deadly dance we hadn't performed since we were pups playing at war. But this was no game. Why throw that in my face? I slammed the words into his mind through our link, my mental voice a jagged scream as we crashed into the hallway table, shattering it to kindling. Hiding in my room. You know why. You know the reason behind it all. The memories that fueled my aversion. The trauma I kept locked away, burned behind my eyes. He knew. He was the only one who truly knew. Alex shoved me backward, his voice a booming snarl that echoed in my skull. "Stop it, Adrian. You have no idea what you're talking about. None!" I recovered my footing, shaking plaster dust from my fur, and circled him. "Oh, brother, I do. I really do. It's because you don't care. You never did. You're a selfish bastard who thinks the world owes him everything, even her." The accusation hit its mark. Alex roared, a sound of pure frustration, and lunged. We slammed into the wall, cracking the drywall, locked jaw to jaw. The noise had drawn the pack. Through the red haze of my vision, I saw figures periphery. Seth, Theo, maybe others, shouting, trying to get close. Foolish. Seth tried to grab my hind leg to pull me off. With a snarl, I kicked out blindly. The force of it sent him flying across the hall into a bookshelf. He crumbled and didn't immediately get up. The others scattered. We were beyond reasoning. We were two natural disasters colliding. I broke free from Alex's grapple and backed up near the stairs, haunches coiling. I needed to end this. I needed to hurt him the way he was hurting me. I focused all my rage, all my inadequacy into one singular point. I launched myself, a missile of black fur and teeth aiming straight for his chest. Then a scent cut through the bloodlust. Wildflowers. A voice, high and desperate, seemed to echo from far away. "Stop, both of you!" Before my brain could process what my eyes were seeing, a small figure darted from the shadows of the hallway. Liyah. She didn't think. She just threw herself between two charging alpha wolves. "No!" The scream tore through my mind, but physics was unforgiving. I was mid-air, fully committed to the charge. I couldn't stop. I couldn't turn. Alex tried to scramble backward, his claws gouging the floor, but I was already there. I didn't hit Alex. My massive shoulder, propelled by hundreds of pounds of furious muscle, slammed squarely into Liyah's fragile body. The sound of the impact was sickening. A dull, wet thud that was louder than any roar we had made. She didn't scream. She didn't even gasp. She was lifted off her feet and hurled backward through the air like a rag doll. She flew through the open doorway of the living room and crashed against the far wall, crumpling to the floor in a motionless heap. The silence that fell over the hallway was instantaneous and absolute. The red haze vanished from my vision, replaced by a cold, paralyzing terror that froze the marrow in my bones. Alex and I stopped, frozen in our wolf forms, chests heaving. We stared through the doorway at the small, broken form lying on the rug. She didn't move. There was no groan of pain, no twitch of a limb. I watched, my entire existence suspended in horror, waiting for the rise and fall of her chest. It didn't come. She wasn't breathing.
Zoe was sitting cross-legged on her bed, painting her toenails a bright, cheerful shade of pink in this late night. She was mid-sentence, telling me about some intricate pack gossip involving Trevor's niece and a warrior from a neighbouring territory, but the words were just a hum in the background. My mind was still downstairs, trapped in that suffocating hallway with the two brothers and the venomous woman between them. I kept replaying the scene, Alex's stoic refusal to let me leave, Adrian's desperate offer of his room, Denise's knowing, cruel smile, and the way I had looked at Alex, searching for guidance like a lost child. I hated that. I hated that I instinctively deferred to him, that my heart seemed to calibrate itself to his presence. So, anyway, I told her, if he doesn't bring you a courting gift by the next full moon, you should just forget him, Zoe was saying, blowing on her toes. She looked up at me, her bright eyes curious. You okay, Liyah? You look like you've seen a ghost. I forced a small smile. Yeah, I'm fine. Just a long day. Tell me about it, she snorted. First Dante and his father's entire pack, then Denise showing up. That woman is a walking migraine. She paused, waving the nail polish brush. So, you and the alphas, huh? That's intense. I flinched. There's no me and the alphas, Zoe. It's just complicated. Complicated is an understatement. You've got the two most powerful wolves in the territory circling you like... She was cut off by a sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. It started as a low rumble, vibrating through the floorboards, and quickly escalated into a full-blown, bone-chilling roar. It wasn't the sound of a wolf playing, or even a wolf warning off an intruder. It was the sound of primal, unchained aggression. Zoe dropped the nail polish bottle, the pink liquid spilling onto her duvet. Goddess, she breathed, her eyes wide. That's Adrian! Another roar answered the first, deeper, louder, shaking the walls of the room. And Alex, she whispered, her voice trembling. The sound of a massive impact echoed from below, followed by the sickening crack of wood splintering. It sounded like they were tearing the house apart. My heart slammed against my ribs. They were fighting. Really fighting. I have to go, I said, already moving toward the door. Zoe scrambled off the bed, grabbing my arm. Liyah, no, you can't go down there. When alphas fight, it's dangerous. You'll get hurt. They might be fighting because of me, I said, pulling my arm free. The guilt was a physical weight in my gut. I had caused this. My presence, my inability to decide, my very existence here had pitted brother against brother. Another crash, this one louder than the last, made the light fixture on the ceiling sway. I have to stop them, I insisted, my voice shaking but resolute. I didn't wait for her to argue. I bolted out of the room and ran down the hallway. The noise was deafening in the hallway. It sounded like a war zone. As I reached, I saw a blur of grey and black fur below, moving with terrifying speed and violence. They were massive, powerful creatures, their fangs bared, their growls filling the air with a thick, oppressive energy. Pack members were gathered at the edges of the hallway, shouting, trying to intervene, but they were being tossed aside like toys. I saw Seth get thrown into a bookshelf and slump to the floor. I moved forward just as the two wolves separated for a heartbeat, circling each other. The black one, Adrian, was near me, his haunches coiled, eyes burning with a terrifying familiar rage. He was about to launch himself at Alex. I didn't think. There was no time to think. I just acted on pure instinct, the need to stop the violence overpowering my fear. Stop! Both of you! I screamed, my voice feeling small and pathetic against the wall of their aggression. I ran forward. I saw Adrian's massive body tense and saw him begin his leap. He was moving too fast. He couldn't stop. And I was right in his path. The last thing I saw was a wall of black fur and muscle hurtling toward me, and Alex's grey form in the distance, his eyes wide with sudden dawning horror. The impact was instantaneous. It wasn't pain, not at first. It was just an overwhelming force that stole my breath and ripped the ground from beneath my feet. The world spun violently, a kaleidoscope of wall, ceiling and floor before darkness swallowed me whole. The darkness wasn't empty. It was a strange, swirling void where I floated, weightless and detached. But then came the heat. It started on my shoulder, right where my birthmark sat. A searing, intense warmth that wasn't painful, just incredibly demanding. It pulsed like a second heart, sending waves of liquid fire through my veins. Out of the shifting shadows, two figures emerged. They were wolves, massive and indistinguishable in the gloom. One felt like a brewing storm, crackling with turbulent, dangerous energy. Adrian. The other felt like the immovable earth beneath a mountain, solid, deep, and protective. Alex. They circled me, their eyes glowing like twin pairs of embers in the dark. They weren't fighting each other anymore. Their intense, predatory focus was squarely on me. The heat in my shoulder intensified, a magnetic pull yanking me towards both of them simultaneously. It felt like being torn in half, yet paradoxically, it felt like the only time I'd ever been whole. A strange, vibrating hum filled my ears, a sound that was both terrifying and deeply ancient. Mine, the voices whispered, overlapping and echoing until I couldn't tell them apart. Mine. The humming grew louder, turning into a buzzing sound, and then into hushed voices. Light pierced my eyelids, too sharp, too bright. A groan escaped my lips as I tried to turn away from the intrusion, shielding my face with my arm. "She's awake, Liyah!" The voice was shrill right next to my ear. Julie. I forced my gritty eyes open. The room swam in and out of focus for a terrifying moment before stabilizing. Faces loomed over me, a crowded circle of concern blocking out the ceiling. Zoe, Julie, Leanne, and others whose names escaped my foggy brain. I realized I was lying on something soft. Zoe's bed. The faint scent of acetone and spun sugar hung in the air. "Liyah, can you hear me?" Zoe asked, leaning close, her usually cheerful face pinched with worry. "Can you see us, honey? Blink if you can see us," Julie instructed, her voice tight. I blinked, trying to clear the last of the thick fog from my mind. "Yes," I croaked, my throat feeling like I'd swallowed sand. "I hear you. I see you." Memory returned in a violent rush. The hallway, the earth-shaking roars, the terrifying sight of two brothers tearing each other apart, and then my own stupid, desperate decision to run between them. The black fur rushing towards me, the impact. Adrian, Alex. Panic surged, cutting through the remaining drowsiness like an ice-cold blade. "The fight!" I gasped, pushing myself up, adrenaline flooding my system. "Adrian, Alex, are they okay? I have to go." I swung my legs over the edge of the bed, trying to stand, but gentle hands pressed firmly on my shoulders, pushing me back down onto the mattress. "Whoa, easy there," Zoe said, stepping in front of me to block my path. "You're not going anywhere just yet, Liyah." "Get out of my way, Zoe. I need to see them. Did they stop?" Julie shook her head, her expression serious. "Liyah, stop moving. You can't just jump up. You've been out cold for 2 days. I froze, my hands gripping the duvet. 2 days? The words felt heavy and alien in my mouth. I stared at her, sure I had misheard. "That's impossible. It just happened." 2 full days, Julie confirmed grimly. "Girl, when Adrian hit you, the sound it made, we all thought you were dead. You were broken. Badly." My breath hitched. I immediately flew my hands to my chest, my ribs, my arms. I patted myself down frantically, expecting to flinch at lances of agony, expecting to feel the rigid plastic of braces or thick bandages. Nothing. I pressed harder on my ribs. They felt solid. My breath came easily. I felt fine. A little stiff, maybe a slight headache hovering behind my eyes, but nothing compared to the catastrophic damage that should have resulted from being tackled by 1,000 pounds of enraged alpha wolf. I sat back against the headboard, utterly bewildered. "But I don't feel broken. I feel fine. How is that possible?" Zoe sat down carefully on the edge of the bed beside me, her voice dropping to a quiet murmur. "It's Alex. He healed you." My eyes snapped to hers. "Healed me? How?" "Alphas. They have a lot of power," Zoe explained, glancing at the other girls before looking back at me. "Especially when it comes to their true mates. If their mate is critically injured, they can push their own life energy into them. Speed up the healing process rapidly. It takes a massive toll on the alpha. It can even be dangerous for them. But it works." She looked down at her hands. "We heard him roaring over you in the living room after it happened. It wasn't an angry roar. It was something else. Something heartbroken." It took a moment for the weight of that to settle. Alex had saved me, again, and he had used some part of his own soul to do it. "Where are they now?" I asked, a heavy coil of dread tightening in my stomach. The silence in the room stretched thin, nervous glances exchanged between the girls. "Alex is upstairs," Julie said finally. "And Adrian?" Zoe bit her lip hard. "Liyah, after he hit you and you went flying," she shuddered. "He just froze. He stood over you for a second, and when he realized you weren't breathing, he just snapped. He shifted back into human form, screaming, and bolted out the front door into the woods. He hasn't come back. It's been 2 days. Denise has had trackers out looking for him, but his scent is erratic." Crushing guilt slammed into me, harder than Adrian ever could. He ran because he thought he had killed me. My stomach churned violently. "It wasn't his fault," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes, blurring my vision. "I jumped in front of him. I was stupid. It was my fault." "Exactly, girl," Julie retorted, her tone sharp but underpinned with immense relief. "Never do that again. Are you crazy? Never try to physically stop 2 fighting wolves, especially alphas, if you're not one yourself. You almost died, Liyah. Thank the goddess for whatever crazy luck is protecting you." I knew she was right, but the logic didn't lessen the guilt. Adrian was out there somewhere, thinking he was a murderer because of me, because I couldn't just stay out of it. I stood up again, slower this time. The girls didn't try to stop me, sensing my resolve. "How is Alex?" I asked, steadying myself on the bedpost. "Exhausted," Zoe said softly. "He hasn't slept in 2 days. He spent the first day and night pouring energy into you, just sitting by your bed watching you breathe. Since you stabilized, he's been running back and forth into the woods, trying to find his brother, then coming back to check on you again. He looks terrible, Liyah." My heart ached. For Adrian lost in the woods with his guilt and trauma, and for Alex shouldering the burden of saving my life while simultaneously hunting for his lost twin. I nodded, wiping the tears from my cheeks. "I need to see him." Zoe gave me a sad, understanding smile and nodded toward the door. "He's in his room. Go." My legs felt strangely steady as I walked down the hallway, a stark contrast to the trembling in my hands. It wasn't physical weakness that made me shake, but the overwhelming weight of the last 48 hours crushing down on me all at once. The hallway itself had been sanitized. The broken table was gone, replaced by an empty space. The drywall where they had crashed had been hastily patched and painted, though the color didn't quite match. The air smelled strongly of lemon-scented cleaner, scrubbing away the lingering copper tang of blood and the ozone smell of furious alpha energy. But they couldn't scrub away the memory. I could still see Adrian's terrified eyes right before impact, could still hear the sickening thud that I now knew was my own body breaking. I reached Alex's door at the end of the hall. It was closed, a heavy oak barrier. I pressed my palm against the wood, hesitant. The scent leaking from beneath the door was thick with him, forest floor and rain, but underscored by a sour note of exhaustion and high-stress sweat. Taking a shaky breath, I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The room was dim, the heavy curtains drawn tight against the afternoon sun, plunging the space into an amber twilight. The air was close and warm. Alex wasn't in bed. He was sitting in a large leather armchair by the darkened window, hunched forward with his elbows on his knees, his head buried in his hands. He looked completely wrecked. The powerful, imposing alpha presence was subdued into a slump of exhausted muscle. He didn't hear the door open. "Alex," I whispered. My voice was still rough, barely loud enough to cut through the silence. His head snapped up. It took a moment for his eyes to focus on me in the dim light. They were bloodshot, rimmed with dark, purplish circles that stood out starkly against his pale skin. His jaw was covered in heavy stubble, his brown hair a matted mess where he'd been gripping it. He stared at me as if I were a ghost, a hallucination born of lack of sleep. "Liyah?" His voice was a wreck, a cracked, gravelly sound that sounded like it hurt his throat to produce. "It's me," I said, stepping fully into the room and closing the door behind me. He stood up, moving with a stiffness that spoke of bone-deep weariness. He swayed slightly on his feet before locking his knees. You're up," he breathed, taking a hesitant step toward me. He reached out a trembling hand, his fingers hovering inches from my arm, as if afraid I would dissipate if he made contact. "You're walking." "I am," I said, closing the distance between us. He grabbed me then, not roughly but with a desperate, consuming need. His hands gripped my shoulders, his thumbs digging in, before they moved down my arms to my waist, then up to cradle my face. His skin was radiating heat, burning hot against my cheeks, the lingering embers of the energy he had poured into me. His eyes frantically scanned my face, searching for bruises, for signs of pain. Finding none, his entire body seemed to sag with relief, a shuddering breath escaping his lips. "Goddess Liyah," he choked out, pulling me against his chest. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, holding me so tight I could barely breathe, but I didn't care. I wrapped my arms around his broad back, feeling the rapid, hard thud of his heart against my own ribs that should have been shattered but were whole because of him. He smelled of sweat and desperation, and an underlying, comforting scent that was just him. "I thought I lost you," he mumbled into my skin, his voice thick with emotion. "When I saw you fall, when you weren't breathing, it stopped my heart, Liyah. It just stopped." Tears pricked my eyes again, soaking into his t-shirt. "I'm so sorry, Alex. I'm so sorry. I was stupid. I shouldn't have jumped in. It's my fault." He pulled back just enough to look at me, his hands framing my face tightly. His expression was fierce, overriding the exhaustion. "Stop," he commanded, his voice gaining a fraction of its usual alpha steel. "Don't you ever say that. Don't take that blame. You were brave, incredibly, recklessly brave. You saw us losing control and you tried to save us from ourselves." "But look what happened," I argued, my voice trembling. "I almost died. You drained yourself to save me, and Adrian." At the mention of his brother's name, the relief in his eyes fractured, replaced by a haunting, deep-seated pain. He let go of my face and stepped back, running a hand through his tangled hair. He turned away from me, walking toward the window. "He thinks he killed you," Alex said hollowly to the closed curtains. "I saw his face right before he bolted, the sheer horror in his eyes. He looked at his own paws like they were monsters." A wave of nausea rolled through me. "We have to tell him. We have to find him, Alex. He needs to know I'm alive." Alex laughed, a short, bitter sound devoid of humor. "Do you think I haven't tried? I've been running the woods for 2 days straight when I wasn't watching you breathe. I've tried mind-linking him until my head felt like it was splitting open. He's blocking everything. He's masking his scent, moving through water, staying downwind. He's using every trick we learned as pups to stay hidden." He turned back to me, his expression bleak. "He doesn't want to be found, Liyah. He can't face what he thinks he did." I walked over to him, reaching out to take his hand. His skin was burning up. He wasn't just tired, he was running on fumes, his body pushing past its limits. "Alex, you're burning up," I said, worry lacing my voice. "You need to rest. You can't keep doing this." He shook his head, pulling his hand away gently. "I can't rest. Not until I find him. If he's out there alone, thinking he's a murderer, the guilt will eat him alive, Liyah. He could do something reckless. He could turn rogue. I can't let that happen. He's my brother." His voice cracked on the last word, revealing the deep fissure of pain beneath his strong facade. The bond between twins was legendary, a connection deeper than regular siblings, deeper even than some mates. The thought of Adrian suffering, alone and believing the worst, was clearly tearing Alex apart just as much as the physical strain. "We'll find him together," I promised, squeezing his arm. "But you're no good to him if you collapse out there. You need sleep, Alex, even just a few hours." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "How can I sleep when I see you lying there, broken, every time I close my eyes? How can I sleep when I know he's out there, running from himself because of what he did to you? Because I'm here, I said softly, stepping closer, forcing him to look at me. I'm standing right here, Alex. I'm whole. I'm breathing. You saved me. Focus on that. He stared at me, his gaze intense, as if trying to imprint my living, breathing form over the memory of my broken body. Slowly, the tension in his shoulders began to ease a fraction. You saved me, I repeated, emphasizing the words. I reached up and touched his cheek, my thumb brushing against the rough stubble. You gave me your energy. That's why you're so exhausted. Let me help you now. Before he could lean into my touch, a sharp, impatient voice called from the hallway. Alex, are you in there? We need to talk. Now. It was Denise. The spell was broken. Alex let out a heavy sigh, the lines of exhaustion around his eyes deepening. He pulled back from me, his alpha mask sliding back into place, though it was thinner now, brittle. Come on, he muttered, turning toward the door. Let's see what she wants. I followed him out into the brightly lit hallway. Denise was pacing, her arms crossed, her usual icy demeanor crackling with impatient energy. When she saw me walk out behind Alex, she stopped dead in her tracks, her eyes widening in genuine surprise. You're up, she stated, her voice losing its edge for a fraction of a second before sharpening again. Well, that's good, because I think the only way we can find Adrian is by her. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger directly at me. I blinked, taken aback. I pointed to myself, confused. Me? You're talking about me? Is there another one around? She snapped, rolling her eyes. Of course you. But how? I asked, looking from her to Alex, who was frowning deeply. Using your healer mark, Denise said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. My hand flew to my shoulder automatically. My mark? How could my mark find Adrian? It pulsed when they were near, yes, and it had burned when he was in pain, but tracking. Before I could voice my confusion, Alex stepped in front of me, cutting off Denise's line of sight. No, he growled, his voice low and final. Absolutely not. She just woke up from a 2-day coma. She's not going anywhere. I'm fine, Alex, I interjected, stepping out from behind him. I looked at Denise, my resolve hardening. If there's a way I can help find Adrian, I want to do it, whatever it takes. See? She's willing, Denise said triumphantly, glaring at Alex. Why are you saying no, Alex? We're talking about your brother here. We know his situation. He's unstable. Who knows what's going on around him by now? What if he's out there dying in pain just because he made physical contact with rogues who tried to attack him? You know a simple touch can cripple him. I stared at Denise, stunned. Beneath her layers of bitchiness and entitlement, there was a genuine, deep-seated worry for Adrian that I hadn't expected. It was a stark reminder that their history, whatever it was complicated. I swallowed down the strange mix of surprise and a flicker of something else I couldn't quite identify. Denise is right, Alex. We can't just sit here. I turned to Denise. Give us a minute. I'll talk to Alex and we'll join you downstairs in a few. Denise looked at me for a long moment, her calculating gaze assessing me. Well, make it quick, she said finally, turning on her heel and stalking down the hall. As soon as she was gone, I took Alex's hand and tugged him back into his room, closing the door. He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. Alex, stop. I'm fine. Truly. I feel strong. And I will not be at peace staying here, resting in bed, knowing I could be a great help in finding Adrian. I can't have that on my conscience. He looked down into my eyes, his own amber spheres clouded with worry and fear. Liyah, do you remember what happened 2 days ago, when Dante and his pack surrounded us on that road? Do you know that they wanted to take you? And they're still out there somewhere, waiting for a perfect time to get you. Taking you out into the woods now is just handing you to them. I nodded, meeting his gaze evenly. I'm very aware of that, Alex. I haven't forgotten. But we won't be alone. If we go in big numbers, with Denise and the other pack warriors, I will be safe. Dante wouldn't attack a large group of pack wolves. He looked at me for a long moment, and I could see the internal battle raging behind his tired eyes. He was torn between his desperate need to find his brother and his equally fierce instinct to protect me. Seeing the toll this was taking on him made me feel incredibly wicked for even arguing. He was already breaking under the strain, and I was only adding to it. My heart ached for him. Instinct took over. I reached up, my hands sliding over his muscular arms, up to his neck, and then cupping his face. I tilted up onto my toes, bringing my face level with his. "I will be fine, Alex," I whispered, pouring all my conviction into my voice. "As long as we stick together, we will make it through. Let's head out and find your brother, so that you can stop worrying, so that we can all stop worrying." I leaned in further, closing the small gap between us, and kissed him. It surprised me as much as it seemed to surprise him. It wasn't a fiery, passionate kiss like in the shower. It was gentle, warm, and deeply reassuring. It was a promise. I lingered there, pulled by a magnetic force I couldn't resist, my lips brushing against his. After a heartbeat of hesitation, Alex responded. A low sound rumbled in his chest as his arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. He deepened the kiss, not with aggression, but with a raw, desperate need for connection, for comfort. It was a real, raw kiss that spoke of shared fear and a growing, undeniable bond. When we finally broke apart, breathless, we just stared at each other in the dim light. The air between us was charged, the dynamic irrevocably shifted. A small, weary smile touched Alex's lips, reaching his eyes for the first time since I'd woken up. "All right," he whispered, his forehead resting against mine. "All right, let's go find my brother." I smiled back, a sense of relief washing over me. I stepped back, standing back on my feet, and nodded. "Let's go." We headed downstairs, the silence between us feeling less heavy now, replaced by a burgeoning sense of shared purpose. In the living room, Denise was waiting, flanked by 3 other wolves I didn't recognize. They were all dressed in dark, practical clothing, their expressions grim and focused. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, pine, and the underlying restless energy of a pack preparing for a hunt. Denise looked up as we approached, her foot tapping impatiently on the hardwood floor. "Well?" she demanded, her voice sharp with irritation. "Have you two come to a conclusion, or are we going to stand here all day?" I nodded, not trusting my voice to be steady. "We're coming." Without another word, Denise stepped back, her body blurring as she shifted. It was a seamless, fluid transformation, bone and muscle rearranging in a blink. Where the cold, blonde woman had stood, there was now a magnificent white wolf. Her fur was pristine, shimmering like fresh snow, even in the dim light of the living room. Her blue eyes, the same icy shade as her human ones, bore into me with an unsettling intensity. Even in this form, she was undeniably beautiful. "Come on." Alex's voice echoed in my head, clear and resonant. I nodded absent-mindedly, my eyes still fixed on the white wolf. Then I froze. The voice hadn't come from beside me. It had come from inside my head. My head snapped around to look at Alex. He was standing right where he had been, but his expression mirrored my own stunned disbelief, though he recovered faster. There was a flicker of understanding in his amber eyes, a dawning realization. Did you just speak into my head?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "It wasn't intended," he said, his voice loud this time, though it sounded strained. He took a step closer, his gaze intense. "But I guess I did. And you heard me. You responded." A slow, almost predatory smile spread across his face. It was a look of triumph, of ownership. "I will explain on the way," he said, his voice low and rough. "I'll shift. You hop on my back." Before I could process what was happening, he began to shift. It was a more violent, powerful transformation than Denise's. His clothes shredded as his body expanded, bones cracking and reforming with a sickening sound that made me flinch. In seconds, a massive wolf stood before me, easily twice the size of Denise. His amber eyes, now feral and glowing, locked onto mine. He crouched low to the ground, a silent invitation. My heart hammered against my ribs. riding a werewolf. It was insanity. But the alternative was staying behind, useless and afraid. I took a deep breath, swallowed my fear from the last experience, and approached him. His fur was thick and coarse under my hands as I awkwardly climbed onto his back, swinging my leg over his broad shoulders. I settled myself, gripping handfuls of his thick mane, my legs wrapping tightly around his powerful torso. He let out a low huff, a sound I felt vibrate through my entire body, before standing up. The world tilted, and I was suddenly much higher off the ground. With a powerful push of his haunches, he bounded forward, launching himself out the open patio door and into the woods. Denise and the other wolves followed close behind, a silent, deadly pack moving as one. The wind whipped my hair around my face, stinging my eyes. I buried my face in his fur, holding on for dear life as we tore through the undergrowth. The world became a blur of green and brown. The only sounds were the rhythmic thud of paws on earth and the rush of wind in my ears. And then, his voice again, clear and calm in the chaos. "It's the mate bond, Liyah." I flinched, nearly losing my grip. "The what?" I thought back, terrified it wouldn't work, that I was just shouting into the void of my own mind. "The mate bond," he repeated, his mental voice tinged with a strange mix of pride and possessiveness. "We're mated. The moon goddess chose us. That's why I could heal you. And that's why we can do this." The words slammed into me harder than the wind. Mated. To Alex. But, Adrian, I thought, the image of his tortured face flashing in my mind. The woman in the dream. She said, "I know." Alex cut in, his mental voice harder now. "She said we both were. I don't pretend to understand it all, Liyah. It's rare, unheard of, almost. 2 alphas, 1 mate." The ground dipped, and I clutched him tighter as he navigated a steep embankment. "But right now," he continued, "this bond is the only thing that matters. It's how we'll find him. You're the compass, Liyah. You need to focus on him, on Adrian, on your mark." I closed my eyes, trying to block out the rush of the wind and the impossible weight of what he had just told me. I focused inward, past the fear, past the confusion. I focused on the mark on my shoulder, on the strange, throbbing heat that had become a constant companion. "Find him," I thought, pouring all my will into the words. "Adrian, where are you?" The heat in my shoulder flared, a sudden sharp spike of pain that made me gasp. But beneath the pain, there was something else, a pull, a faint magnetic tug that seemed to be leading us. North. "I feel it," I thought, opening my eyes. It's pulling me, that way." I pointed with one hand, though I knew he couldn't see it. "Good girl," his voice rumbled in my head. "Hang on." He surged forward, picking up speed, his powerful muscles bunching and releasing beneath me. Denise and the others fell in silently behind us, following the lead of their alpha, following the impossible, terrifying pull of destiny. We were running into the unknown, bound together by ancient magic and a desperate need to save the other half of this fractured, impossible whole. The forest blurred into a tunnel of green and shadow as Alex pushed harder, his massive paws tearing up the earth. The speed was exhilarating, terrifying. I buried my face in the thick fur of his neck, the coarse texture scratching my skin, the heat radiating from his massive body keeping the chill wind at bay. It was sensory overload, not just the physical ride, but the mental intrusion. Alex wasn't just speaking in my head, I could feel him. An undercurrent of iron-willed determination, a simmering rage at the situation, and beneath it all, a fierce, possessive hum that intensified whenever I tightened my grip on him. "Focus, Liyah." His voice cut through the mental noise, sharp and commanding. "Don't let your mind wander. The mark. Follow the heat." I squeezed my eyes shut, blocking out the dizzying rush of trees. I turned inward, concentrating on the burning sensation in my shoulder. It was no longer a dull throb. It was a rhythmic pulse like a second heartbeat, faster and more urgent than my own. "Left," I projected, the word feeling clumsy in my mind. More, sharp left. Without breaking stride, Alex banked hard to the left, his claws digging into the loam for traction. Behind us, I heard the huffing breaths of the other wolves as they scrambled to keep up with their alpha's sudden turn. Denise, the white blur in my peripheral vision, was running just off Alex's flank, her anxiety palpable, even without a mental link. We were deep in the woods now, far past the trails I had seen when I first arrived. The trees were older here, thicker, the canopy so dense it blocked out most of the late afternoon sun, bathing everything in an eerie twilight. The air changed. It grew heavier, thick with the scent of pine needles crushed underfoot, damp earth, and something else, something metallic and sharp. Blood, Alex's thought was a growl. He's hurt. My heart leapt into my throat. Adrian? I don't know. The scent is stale, mixed with something else, distress, pure panic. The pulse in my shoulder ratcheted up, becoming a searing sting that made me gasp aloud. He's close, Alex. He's right here. Alex slowed, transitioning from a full sprint to a stalking lope. The pack behind us fanned out, silent shadows slipping between the trees. The tension was suffocating. We weren't hunting prey. We were hunting a volatile, powerful alpha who believed he was a monster. We broke through a thick wall of brambles and skid to a halt at the edge of a clearing. The devastation stopped my breath. It looked like a tornado had touched down in this small circle of the forest. Saplings were snapped in half like twigs. The ground was churned up, deep furrows gouged into the dirt by massive claws. Large patches of moss and undergrowth were scorched, withered and black, as if exposed to intense unnatural heat. God, I breathed, sliding awkwardly off Alex's back as he crouched low. My legs felt jelly-like after the intense ride. Alex shifted instantly. The sound of cracking bones was louder in the silence of the clearing. He stood up, naked and breathing hard, his eyes scanning the wreckage. Denise and the others remained in wolf form, circling the perimeter, whimpering low in their throats at the scent of their distress, Alpha. "Adrian!" Alex roared, his voice booming through the trees. "Come out! It's over!" Silence answered him, only the rustle of wind through the broken branches. Then, a sound from the far side of the clearing, hidden in the deep shadows of a fallen oak. A ragged, wet gasp. I didn't wait for Alex. I couldn't. The pull in my shoulder was agony now, dragging me forward. I stumbled across the churned earth toward the sound. "Liyah, wait!" Alex barked, grabbing my arm, but I wrenched free. "He needs me!" I cried out, not knowing why I was so certain, only knowing that I was. I rounded the massive trunk of the fallen oak. Adrian was there. He was curled into a tight ball against the dead wood, naked, shaking violently. His skin was covered in dirt and scratches, smeared with dried blood from wounds I couldn't immediately see. But it was the energy radiating off him that terrified me. The air around him shimmered, hot and distorted, like pavement on a scorching day. The grass directly beneath him was dead, blackened ash. He heard my approach and flinched violently, trying to curl in tighter, hiding his face in his knees. "Go away!" he choked out, his voice wrecked, a guttural sound that barely resembled human speech. "Get away from me! I'll kill you! I kill everything I touch!" My heart shattered at the raw despair in his voice. He sounded like a wounded animal, cornered and terrifyingly convinced of his own monstrous nature. The heat radiating from him was intense, prickling against my skin even from a few feet away, but the mark on my shoulder pulsed with a different kind of heat, a demanding, urgent warmth. "No," I whispered, taking a hesitant step closer. "You won't kill me, Adrian. I'm here." "Liyah, stop!" Alex's hand clamped onto my shoulder, pulling me back hard. His face was pale, his eyes wide with terror. "You can't! Look at the ground, his energy. It's uncontrolled. He's unstable. If you touch him now, it could what?" I challenged, spinning to face him, the words tumbling out in a rush of adrenaline and strange, newfound certainty. "Kill me, like his wolf almost did." I pointed to the mark, now throbbing visibly beneath my t-shirt. "This thing, it brought us here. It's pulling me to him. You said I was the healer, Alex. You said I was the key. But not like this, he pleaded, his grip tightening. He's not in control. He thinks he's poison, Liyah. If his mind believes it, his power will make it real. He could drain you dry in seconds or burn you alive. Or I could heal him, I countered, my voice trembling but firm. You healed me with your alpha energy. Why can't I do the same for him? I have this power, Alex. I feel it inside me, humming. It wants to help him. Alex hesitated, the war raging in his eyes again. His protective instinct battled with the desperate hope that I might be right. While they argued, Adrian let out another agonizing groan, his body convulsing. The shimmering heat around him intensified, a wave of it washing over us, hot and suffocating. The leaves on the nearest branch of the fallen oak shriveled and turned brown in an instant. That was it. I couldn't stand here and watch him suffer, watch him destroy himself with his own power. I wrenched my arm free from Alex's grip with a strength I didn't know I possessed. Trust me, I said, not looking back. I walked towards Adrian. The heat grew with every step, a physical barrier trying to push me back. It felt like walking into an open oven. Sweat prickled on my forehead, and my breath caught in my throat. Adrian? I said softly, kneeling on the blackened ground beside him, careful not to touch the scorching earth. Adrian, look at me. He didn't move, just continued to shake, his breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Don't, he whimpered into his knees. Please don't. I'm poison. I'm death. You are not death, I said fiercely, the words welling up from a deep primal place inside me. You are an alpha, you are strong, and you are not alone. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. The mark on my shoulder felt like it was on fire. It was now or never. I reached out and laid my hand gently on his bare, dirt-streaked shoulder. The reaction was instantaneous. A jolt of raw, untamed energy slammed into me, so powerful it felt like a physical blow. It was searing hot, a chaotic whirlwind of pain, fear, and self-loathing that threatened to overwhelm my senses. My vision went white at the edges, and a scream tore from my throat. Behind me, I heard Alex shout my name, heard the scrambling of paws as the wolves reacted to my distress. But I didn't let go. Instead, I focused. I focused on the mark, on the wellspring of cool, calming energy I had felt within myself before. I imagined it flowing from my core, down my arm, and into my hand, a river of healing light pouring into the maelstrom of his chaotic power. Adrian. I pushed the thought into the mental link I now knew existed, praying he could hear me. It's me. It's Liyah. Let me in. Let me help you. His body went rigid under my touch. His head snapped up, his eyes wide and wild, the irises swirling with a chaotic mix of his natural blue and a terrifying glowing red. He looked at me, not with recognition, but with the terrified, defensive fury of a cornered beast. Liyah, he choked out, his voice a distorted growl. Yes, I gasped, fighting to hold on to my own consciousness against the onslaught of his energy. It's me. You're safe. We're safe. He squeezed his eyes shut, a shudder running through him. No, too much. Poison. Burn. You won't burn me, I promised, pouring every ounce of my will into the words. I pushed harder, forcing my healing energy past his defenses, into the core of his turmoil. Feel this, Adrian. Feel me. The heat around us didn't lessen, but the quality of it changed. The scorching, destructive edge began to dull, replaced by an intense, throbbing warmth that mirrored the sensation in my own shoulder. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the rigid tension in his muscles began to ease. The chaotic red swirls in his eyes faded, leaving only his stunning, terrified blue. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since I touched him. The despair in his eyes was so profound it stole my breath away. You touched me, he whispered, his voice cracking with disbelief. And you're not dying. I'm right here, I said, my voice weak, draining fast. The effort was immense. I'm holding you, Adrian, and I'm alive. He stared at my hand on his shoulder, as if he couldn't quite believe it was real. Then, slowly, tentatively, his own hand reached out. His fingers, trembling violently, brushed against my cheek. He flinched, waiting for the inevitable backlash, the pain, the destruction. But nothing happened, just the feeling of his skin against mine, hot and rough with dirt. A strangled sob broke from his throat. His eyes welled up, tears cutting clean tracks through the grime on his face. He leaned into my touch, closing his eyes, a look of pure, utter relief washing over his features that was more heartbreaking than his pain. "Liyah," he breathed, his voice barely audible. "You're here." Behind me, I felt Alex approach slowly, his presence a solid weight of relief and lingering fear. The pack murmured in the background, a collective exhale. I kept my hand on Adrian's shoulder, continuing to pour my energy into him, even as my own strength began to wane. I had found him. I helped him. The connection stabilized, the chaotic heat settling into a steady, powerful hum beneath my palm. Then, before I could retract my hand, Adrian moved. His hand flew up to my nape, his grip possessive, bordering on rough, pulling me down to him. His lips crashed onto mine. My eyes shot open in shock. It wasn't gentle like Alex's kiss in the bedroom. This was desperate, raw, a drowning man finding air. I froze, my whole body tense. Alex was standing right there. The pack was watching. The memory of our first kiss in the woods flashed through my mind, but this was real, human skin on skin, in front of everyone. I felt pulled in two directions, the bond inside me humming wildly, confused by the proximity of both brothers. But the sheer, overwhelming relief pouring off Adrian was intoxicating. It washed over me, a tidal wave of gratitude and disbelief that he was okay, that we were okay. I couldn't help it. My eyes fluttered closed, and I kissed him back, meeting his desperation with my own necesidad to comfort, my hands clutching his dirt-streaked shoulders. The moment lasted only seconds, but it felt like an eternity. We broke apart, gasping, our foreheads resting against each other for a fleeting heartbeat. I felt electrified, alive in a way I hadn't before. The bond thrummed, and for the first time I felt a distinct echo of Adrian's emotions, pure, unadulterated relief, alongside Alex's steady, heavy presence nearby. We stood up, him shaky, me drained. I turned awkwardly, not knowing where to look, but Adrian's hand slid down from my neck to grip my hand tightly, refusing to let go. I glanced over at Alex. He had stepped back, giving us physical space, but his eyes were fixed on us. His jaw was tight, his amber gaze swirling with a complex, painful storm. There was hurt, yes, but also a resigned understanding of the bond's dictates, underlaid by a fierce, unwavering possessiveness that hadn't dimmed one bit. He looked like a king who had just agreed to share his throne, hating it, but accepting the necessity. I quickly looked away, guilt pricking at me, only to catch Denise's wolf form. She had stopped pacing. Her icy blue eyes were locked on me, and if looks could incinerate, I would have been ash on the forest floor. It was a glare of pure, murderous hatred. "We have to move." Alex's voice was rough, breaking the tension. "This place isn't safe." Adrian insisted I ride with him this time. He shifted. His wolf was magnificent just as I remember, lean and fast, and I climbed onto his back, feeling the strange, new hum of his energy beneath me. We hadn't gone a mile when the forest erupted around us. It wasn't like the road. This was an army. Wolves poured from the shadows, from behind trees, dropping from low branches. Not 20 like before, 40, maybe 50. A sea of snarling jaws and hostile eyes surrounded us. My heart slammed against my ribs, cold fear washing away the warmth of the healing moment. We were drowning in fur and teeth. The chaos was deafening as the attack began. Adrian was a blur of motion, staying tight to Alex and Denise's small pack, his body a shield around my legs as I clung to his back. But there were too many. I watched in horror as 3 large grey wolves synchronized their attack on Alex, forcing him onto his defensive hind legs. They were going to be overwhelmed. I couldn't just sit there, a liability waiting to be dragged down. I tapped Adrian's massive shoulder frantically. "Put me down!" I shouted the thought at him, hoping the tenuous mental link still held. He hesitated, snarling at an approaching wolf, his muscles bunching to leap. I slapped his back harder, stinging my own palm. "Now, Adrian, you have to help them. Alex needs you. We're outnumbered." With a reluctant, guttural growl that vibrated through my bones, he dipped low. I slid off, my feet hitting the leaf-strewn ground hard. "Help Alex!" I screamed over the cacophony of roars and yaps, pointing towards where his brother was fighting off 4 wolves now. "Go! I'll manage!" I pointed to a small fissure in a rock face nearby, a tiny cave entrance barely big enough for a human to squeeze through, too small for a shifted wolf. "I'll be in there." Adrian looked at me, his timber wolf eyes filled with conflict, then swung his massive head towards Alex. With a final protective nudge against my hand, he threw himself into the fray, launching himself at the wolves attacking his brother. I scrambled toward the rock face, wedging myself backward into the damp, cramped darkness of the tiny cave. It smelled of wet stone and earth. I huddled there, watching the nightmare unfold through the narrow opening. It was pure agony. Fear clawed at my throat as I watched fur rip and blood fly in the dim light. I prayed harder than I ever had in my life. Prayed Adrian's newfound stability held against the violence. Prayed Alex didn't go down under the sheer numbers. Prayed no one died today because of me. I needed something, a weapon, a sharp rock, a heavy stick, anything just in case one of them tried to squeeze in here. I felt around in the gloom behind me. My hand brushed against air at the back of the small alcove. It wasn't a shallow cave, it tunneled further back. My gut screamed at me instantly, "Don't go in there. It felt wrong. Dangerous." I turned back to the entrance quickly, intending to stay right by the opening. Too quickly. Rough hands grabbed me from the shadows behind me before I could even inhale to scream. A large, calloused hand clamped viciously over my mouth, stifling my cry into a pathetic whimper against skin. I was yanked backward, spun around in the tight space. Dante. His handsome face was inches from mine in the dark, twisted into a sickeningly fake, cute smile that sent ice straight to my marrow. His eyes held zero warmth. His hot breath ghosted against my ear, his voice a terrifying whisper over the sounds of the battle outside. "Think about your father, healer, your stepmother, your little friend. What's her name? Hana." My blood ran cold, my heart stopped. He knew everything. "If you don't want them dead before sunrise," he hissed, his grip on my jaw tightening painfully, "you come quietly." I froze in absolute horror, tears stinging my eyes. "Don't waste time wondering how I know," he sneered, seeing the question in my eyes. "Humans are so easy to track. Piece of cake." He started dragging me backward into the tunnel deeper into the rock. I desperately looked back over my shoulder at the thin slice of light from the entrance. I couldn't see Adrian's timber coat or Alex's. The fighting was too intense, a chaotic swirl of violence. I only caught a glimpse of Denise's white form disappearing under a wave of grey attackers. Then Dante yanked me harder, violently. My footing slipped on the damp stone. My head cracked hard against a low-hanging rock edge hidden in the dark. Pain exploded behind my eyes, bright white stars dancing in my vision, and then the world went abruptly, mercifully black. I gasped, jolting awake as freezing cold water splashed over my face. I was sputtering, coughing, shivering violently on a hard, cold stone floor. I looked around wildly, my head throbbing with a dull, heavy ache. I was in a dimly lit, cavernous room that smelled of stale air and aggression. I was surrounded by grim-faced older men seated in high-backed chairs. Dante stood off to the side, leaning against a wall, smirking at me. An old man, seated directly in front of me, leaned forward. He looked like a wrinkled, crueler version of Dante, his eyes hard as flint. "From now on," the old man grated out, his voice like gravel in a mixer, "you are my healer. You belong to me." The sheer audacity of it, combined with the concussion and the terror, made me laugh. It started low in my throat and turned into a dry, humorless chuckle that echoed in the quiet room. I looked him dead in the eye, mustering every ounce of defiance I had left. "Fuck you." His hand moved in a blur. The slap echoed like a gunshot. It snapped my head to the side, stinging fiercely. I tasted the sharp, coppery tang of blood where my tooth cut the inside of my cheek. I didn't cower. The pain just sharpened my rage. I spat a mouthful of bloody saliva straight onto the stone floor in front of his expensive-looking boots, sat bolt upright, and glared at him. "I belong to no one," I snarled, my voice shaking but loud. "And if you think you can keep me here, you're brain dead. My mates will burn this entire mountain to the ground to find me." Before the old man could strike again, Dante moved. He was on me instantly, crouching down. His fingers dug brutally into my cheeks, squeezing so hard my vision spotted with stars again, forcing my face up to his. "Behave, bitch," he snarled, the cute facade completely gone, replaced by rabid cruelty. "Remember what I told you. I have eyes on your family 24/7. One wrong move from you here, one refusal to do as you're told, and I make the call. They'll burn in their beds tonight." It wasn't the physical pain in my cheeks that broke me. It was the image his words conjured. My dad, asleep in his armchair with the TV on. My stepmom in the kitchen, in her room pretending the world doesn't exist. The thought of them waking up to flames, trapped, because of me. The fight drained out of my body like water from a cracked glass. My hands, which had been curled into fists, went slack. My breathing hitched, turning into jagged, shallow gasps. I stared at Dante, wide-eyed, seeing not a handsome man, but a monster holding the leash to my entire world. He saw the shift in my eyes, the moment terror eclipsed rage. He smiled, a genuine, chilling curl of his lips this time. "Good girl," he sneered, releasing my face with a rough shove that sent me sprawling back onto the cold stone. "See? I knew you were smart." I lay there, gasping, the taste of blood heavy in my mouth, my head spinning. The old man leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Now that we understand each other," his gravelly voice echoed in the cavernous room. "You are here for a purpose. My son, Dante's brother, is dying. Our pack healers are useless incompetents. You will fix him." He didn't ask. It was a statement of fact, a sentence. "And until he is well," he continued, his eyes devoid of any human empathy, "you will remain here. You will do exactly as you are told. If you try to escape, if you try to contact your mates, as you called them, or if you fail to heal him—" He let the threat hang in the damp air, heavier than the stone ceiling above us. "Dante makes the call." I couldn't speak. I could only nod weakly, tears leaking from the corners of my eyes, mixing with the icy water still dripping from my hair. "Take her to the holding cell," he commanded, waving a dismissive hand. "Let her rot for a night. Maybe the cold will freeze the last bits of rebellion out of her." Two men, silent and hulking, hauled me to my feet. My legs barely supported me. They dragged me out of the main cavern and down a narrow, winding corridor, carved rough from the rock. The air grew even colder, damper, smelling of mildew and despair. They stopped before a heavy iron door set into the rock wall. One guard unlocked it with a massive key, the metal screeching in protest. They threw me inside. I stumbled and fell onto a pile of mouldy straw that served as a bed. The door slammed shut behind me with a final, deafening boom, plunging the small, windowless cell into pitch blackness. I crawled into the corner, pulling my knees to my chest, shivering violently from the cold and shock. The silence was absolute, save for the sound of my own ragged breathing. I reached out with my mind, desperately trying to feel the bond, to feel Alex or Adrian. It was there, but it felt muffled, distant, like trying to hear music through thick concrete. The depth of the caves, the sheer weight of the mountain above me, was dampening the connection. I could feel a frantic, searing panic on the other end. They knew I was gone, but I couldn't reach them. I couldn't reassure them. And even if I could, what would I say? Don't come for me. The realization crushed me. If they came, if they attacked this place, Dante would make the call. My family would die. I was trapped. Perfectly, horrifically trapped. I buried my face in my freezing wet hands and finally, quietly, began to sob. Time lost all meaning in that suffocating blackness. There was only the cold that seeped into my very marrow, the rhythmic drip of unseen water somewhere nearby, and the terrifying hollow ache in my chest where the vibrant connection to my mates should have been. The bond wasn't gone, but it was buried under tons of rock. It felt like listening to a screaming storm from the bottom of a deep well. I could feel their frantic energy, jagged spikes of panic and fury that occasionally broke through the dampening effect of the mountain. Every time I felt a surge of their desperate search, a fresh wave of nausea rolled through me. "Stay away," I begged silently into the dark, hugging my shivering knees tighter. "Please just stay away." The image of my father's house engulfed in flames was branded onto the back of my eyelids. I don't know if I slept or just drifted into a frozen stupor. My head throbbed with a dull, persistent rhythm, and the inside of my cheek was swollen and tender where I'd bitten it. The sound of the heavy iron key scraping into the lock was deafening in the silence. I scrambled backward on the filthy straw, pressing my spine against the freezing, slimy rock wall as the door groaned open. Harsh yellow light from a battery-operated lantern sliced through the darkness, blinding me. I threw a hand up to shield my eyes, cowering instinctively. It was one of the hulking guards from before. He didn't speak. He just stepped inside, the heavy tread of his boots vibrating on the stone floor. He looked down at me with the same indifference a person might show a cockroach. He dropped a dented metal bowl onto the floor with a loud clang, spilling half of its contents, greyish water, onto the straw. Next to it, he tossed a hunk of something that looked like rock-hard, stale bread. "Eat," he grunted, his voice thick and uninterested. "Alpha says you need strength for tomorrow." I didn't move. I just stared at the dirty water, my throat burning with thirst. He took a step toward me, and I flinched violently, curling tighter into a ball. He stopped, a cruel smirk twisting his thick lips. "Dante was right. You broke easy." He laughed, a low, rumbling sound that made my skin crawl. "Don't worry, little healer. Nobody touches you unless the Alpha orders it. You're valuable property now." He turned and walked out, taking the light with him. The boom of the door sealing shut felt like the lid of a coffin closing. I waited in the dark for a long time, listening to his fading footsteps until silence reclaimed the cell. Only then did I crawl forward on my hands and knees, feeling around in the damp straw for the bowl. My hands were shaking so badly, I spilled more water, lifting it to my lips. It tasted metallic and gritty, like dirt and rust, but I gulped it down desperately. The bread was so hard I had to gnaw on it like an animal, the crust scraping the roof of my mouth, but I forced myself to swallow the dry lumps. He said I needed strength for tomorrow. That meant tomorrow I would face the dying sun. Tomorrow I would have to perform. I finished the meagre scraps and crawled back to my corner. The small intake of food and water didn't warm me, but it settled the clawing emptiness in my stomach. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the sensory deprivation of the cell. I focused on the muffled hum of the bond, trying to send a single calm thought through the static. Not a plea for help, but a lie to soothe them. I'm alive. Wait. It was the only thing I could do. I had to stay alive. I had to be their healer. Because if I failed, if I gave them any reason to make that call, the people I loved would burn. The defiance was gone, replaced by a cold, hard stone of survival instinct sitting heavily in my gut. I would do whatever they wanted. There was no morning in the caves, only a harsh, sudden end to the darkness. The cell door crashed open again, the sound magnified a dozen times in the small space. I jerked awake from a fitful, shivering doze, my heart hammering against my ribs. Before I could scramble back, 2 pairs of rough hands grabbed my arms and hauled me to my feet. My legs, stiff with cold and cramped from curling on the hard floor, buckled. They didn't care. They dragged me, my toes scraping the stone, out into the corridor. It was the same guards, their faces impassive slabs of rock in the lantern light. They didn't speak, just marched me forward, deeper into the mountain. The journey was a blur of winding tunnels, some narrow and suffocating, others opening into vast, natural caverns where I caught glimpses of their hidden world. I saw cook fires with hunched figures around them, heard the low murmur of voices, the sharp yip of a wolf pup. This wasn't just a hideout. It was a subterranean village, a fortress buried in the earth. The scale of it made my stomach plummet. How could anyone ever find me here? The air changed as we went deeper. The damp mildew smell gave way to something fouler, the sickly sweet, cloying stench of rotting flesh and old blood. We stopped outside a curtain made of heavy animal hides hung across an archway. The smell was pouring out from behind it, thick enough to taste on the back of my tongue. One guard shoved the curtain aside and pushed me through. The room beyond was a natural cave, but braziers burned in the corners, casting a flickering orange glow and heating the air to a suffocating temperature. In the centre of the room, on a cot made of stretched canvas and furs, lay a young man. He was thrashing weakly, his skin a waxy, greyish colour glistening with sweat. A tangled mess of bandages covered his midsection, stained dark and crusty with dried blood and yellow discharge. The smell was coming from him. The old man, Dante's father, stood by the head of the cot, his face grim. Dante was leaning against the far wall, arms crossed, watching me with that same predatory, amused glitter in his eyes. He didn't need to say anything. His presence was a physical weight, a reminder of the phone call he could make. "Took you long enough," the old man growled at the guards, then turned his cold gaze on me. He pointed a gnarled finger at the figure on the cot. "My son, Marco. A boar gorged him 3 days ago. The infection is spreading fast." He stepped back, clearing the space beside the cot. "Fix him." It wasn't a request. It was a command that carried the weight of my family's lives. I swallowed hard, the metallic taste of fear coating my throat. I took a hesitant step toward the cot. The heat in the room was making my head spin, and the smell was nauseating up close. Marco groaned, a wet, gurgling sound, his eyes rolling back in his head. He looked younger than Dante, maybe barely 20. Under different circumstances, my healer's heart would have broken for him. Now, I just felt a cold dread. I reached out, my hand trembling fiercely, and hovered it over the soiled bandages on his stomach. Even without touching him, I could feel the angry, pulsing heat of the infection beneath the skin. It was bad, deep. "Well?" Dante's voice cut through the air sharp as a whip. "We're waiting, little healer." I jumped, a fresh wave of terror washing over me. I couldn't fail. I closed my eyes, trying to block out Dante's stare, the smell of rot and the suffocating heat. I tried to find that centre of calm within myself, the place where the healing energy resided. It was harder than it had ever been. The power felt sluggish, tainted by my own fear and the coercion of the situation. But I forced it. I pushed past the blocks, drawing on the wellspring of energy that was my birthright and my curse. My palms began to tingle, a faint, cool glow emanating from beneath my skin. I took a deep breath and laid my hands gently onto the boy's fevered flesh. The moment my palms made contact with his sweat-slicked skin, a jolt went through me, not of power, but of sickness. It was like plunging my hands into sewage. Through the bond of my gift, I didn't just see the wound, I felt it. The boar's tusk had torn deep, shredding muscle and nicking his bowel. The infection wasn't just in the cut, it was in his blood, a spreading black venom that was shutting down his organs one by one. He was already dead. His body just hadn't stopped moving yet. I choked back bile. The heat of his fever burned against my cool hands, a desperate, consuming fire. "Focus," Dante snapped from the corner. I squeezed my eyes shut tighter, blocking him out. I had to. I visualized the wound, not as it was, but as it should be. I visualized the angry, necrotic blackness being pushed back by cool, clean white light. I pushed. It was like trying to hold back a mudslide with my bare hands. The infection was aggressive, alive in its own way, fighting to consume him. It pushed back against my energy, a slithering, oily resistance that made my skin crawl. Sweat popped out on my forehead, mixing with the condensation already in the stifling room. My arms began to tremble, the muscles burning with the effort of channeling so much power so quickly. It felt like I was siphoning off my own life force and pouring it into this boy who was part of the pack that threatened mine. Marco convulsed violently under my hands, a choked cry tearing from his throat as the healing magic clashed with the rot inside him. "What are you doing to him?" the old man roared, taking a step forward. "She's saving him," Dante said, his voice strangely calm, though I could hear the tension underneath. "Let her work." I grit my teeth so hard my jaw ached. I couldn't let go. If I stopped now, the backlash would kill him instantly. I dug deeper, past the exhaustion, past the fear, tapping into the primal well of energy that the mysterious woman had warned me about. I thought of Hannah's laugh, my stepmother, my drunken dad. For them, only for them. A surge of power, hotter and fiercer than before, rushed through me. I gasped as it poured out of my palms. The soft glow intensified into a blinding white brilliance that lit up the dim cave, casting long, dancing shadows against the rock walls. Under my hands, the flesh began to knit. I could feel the corruption being purged, forced out of his system. Thick, yellow-black pus oozed rapidly from beneath the bandages, soaking them further before the flow suddenly stopped. The angry red streaks tracing up his torso began to recede, fading to pale pink. The heat under my hands broke. His skin, previously scorching, cooled rapidly to a normal temperature. His thrashing ceased, replaced by deep, even breaths. The light pouring from me sputtered and died. I yanked my hands back as if burned, gasping for air. The room spun viciously. My knees gave out and I collapsed onto the hard stone floor beside the cot, trembling uncontrollably from head to toe. My energy felt completely hollowed out, leaving behind a crushing exhaustion that made my bones ache. Silence fell over the room, broken only by my ragged breathing and Marco's newly steady inhalation. The old man was beside the cot in an instant, his large hand resting on his son's forehead, then checking the pulse at his neck. He carefully peeled back a corner of the sodden bandage. I couldn't see it from the floor, but I heard his sharp intake of breath. He straightened up, his shoulders sagging slightly. The murderous tension drained from his posture, replaced by the cold, hard resolve of a leader who had just secured a valuable asset. He turned to look down at me, his expression unreadable. "He'll live." Dante pushed off the wall and sauntered over, stopping so his boots were inches from my face. He crouched down, balancing on the balls of his feet, and tilted my chin up with a rough finger so I had to look into his smirking face. "See, sweetheart," he murmured, his eyes glittering in the firelight. "I told you you'd be useful. Good girl." He stood up and jerked his head toward the door. The two guards from before stepped through the curtain. "Take her back," the old man ordered, his voice devoid of any gratitude. "And give her a blanket. We need her rested. She has more work to do tomorrow." Dante laughed, a low, cruel sound that followed me as the guards hauled me to my feet, my legs dragging like dead weight, and dragged me back into the oppressive darkness of the tunnels. I had saved a life, but I had never felt more like a prisoner. The guards had tossed me back into the cell with a scratchy wool blanket, but sleep was impossible. My body hummed with the painful residue of forced healing, and my mind replayed Dante's threat on a loop. Then the ground shook. It wasn't a tremor. It was a deep, guttural vibration that rattled the teeth in my skull. Distant, muffled howls echoed through the stone corridors, not the casual sounds of pack life, but sharp, panicked cries of alarm. The acrid smell of smoke and something metallic like ozone began to seep under the heavy iron door. Chaos had erupted outside. Suddenly, the birthmark on my shoulder, usually a dull throb, flared with searing heat. It was so intense I gasped, clutching at my shirt as a brilliant, pulsating golden light shone right through the fabric, illuminating the dingy cell. The muffling effect of the cave shattered. The dam broke. "Liyah! Goddess, Liyah, where are you?" Alex and Adrian's voices didn't just enter my mind, they exploded into it, deafening in their panic and fury. The connection was so sudden, so raw, it nearly brought me to my knees. I could feel them, a chaotic swirl of adrenaline, terror, and murderous rage. They were close. They were fighting. My heart leaped with instinctive relief, instantly followed by a crashing wave of absolute terror. "No," I thought, projecting the word with all the fear choking me. "No, you have to go back." "What?" Alex's mental voice was a confused roar. "We're here for you." "It's not a good time," I screamed silently, tears pricking my eyes. The image of Dante's phone, of Hannah's innocent face, flashed in my mind. "Please, go back. They'll kill them. They'll kill my family if you're here." "Family? Liyah, what are you talking about? Who?" Adrian sounded frantic, his wolf right at the surface. Before I could explain, my cell door banged open. The two guards from before rushed in, their faces pale with fear. They didn't bother with shackles this time. They just grabbed my arms, hauling me off the floor with bruising force. "Move! Alpha's orders, get her upstairs to the main house," one barked over the rising din of howls and crashing rocks outside. They dragged me down the corridor, moving fast. I stumbled, my feet barely touching the ground. "Liyah, answer us! We're breaching the perimeter!" Alex shouted in my head. I was being pulled toward a set of stairs carved into the rock, leading up toward the surface. "Alex, Adrian, stop! You don't understand." "Psst! Healer!" The physical voice, sharp and female, cut through the mental chaos. I jerked my head toward a shadowed alcove just before the stairs. Standing there, almost invisible against the dark rock, was the woman in the green hoodie, the one from the restaurant, the one who had warned me. She stepped out of the shadows, locked eyes with my captors, and let out a short, piercing whistle that sounded unnatural, like wind shrieking through a cavern. The effect was instantaneous. The two large guards went rigid mid-stride, their hands still gripping my arms turned to stone. Their eyes were open, but unseeing. It was as if time had simply stopped for them. I froze, staring at them in shock, my breath caught in my throat. What was this? The woman was moving before I could process it. She rushed forward, prying their stiff fingers off my arms with surprising strength. "We have to move," she hissed, grabbing my wrist. Her grip was urgent, bony. "Now, before the Alpha breaks my hold. It won't last long against an Alpha's will." From somewhere far above us, echoing down the stairwell, a roar shook the very foundations of the mountain. "Close the territory!" It was Dante's voice, bestial with rage. "Seal every exit! No one takes her!" Followed by the old man's booming command, "Kill the intruders! Bring me the healer!" The woman tugged hard on my arm, pulling me away from the stairs and down a darker, narrower tunnel. "Come on!" I dug my heels in, resisting. Panic clawed at my throat. "No, I can't leave. You heard him. He'll kill my parents. He'll kill my friend." The woman spun on me, her pale eyes fierce under the hood. "They are empty threats, girl. They wouldn't waste resources tracking humans halfway across the country when they are under siege by two powerful alphas. They were bluffing to make you compliant. Now move, or we both die here." I hesitated. Bluffing? Could I take that risk? The bond in my head was screaming with Alex and Adrian's frantic calls, their proximity making my skin tingle. Seeing my hesitation, and hearing the thudding of heavy paws pounding down the stairs above, the woman muttered something under her breath, quick, sibilant words that made the air shiver around us. My body went instantly rigid. I remained conscious, my eyes wide with terror, but I lost all voluntary control. My legs turned and began to march, matching the woman's hurried pace as she towed me deeper into the shadows, away from the stairs, away from Alex and Adrian, and towards a hidden fissure in the rock wall that led out into the night. We emerged into the thick woods on the far side of the mountain, the sounds of the battle, snarls, crashing timber, enraged howls, faded into the distance. The moonlight filtered through the canopy, casting long, skeletal shadows. We ran until my lungs burned, though my legs moved without my permission. Finally, in a small, dense clearing miles away from the pack grounds, she stopped. She turned to me and muttered another string of strange words. I gasped, air rushing into my lungs as control snapped back into my body. I stumbled, catching myself against a tree, my legs shaking. I spun around to face her, fury overriding fear. "What did you do to me?" I demanded, my voice hoarse. That wasn't shifter magic. Who are you really?" The woman stood silent for a moment, her breathing heavy. Slowly she reached up and pulled back the green hood. Her face was gaunt, prematurely aged, with sunken eyes that held a depth of sorrow I couldn't fathom. But it was what she did next that stopped the breath in my lungs. She turned her back to me and reached down, pulling the hem of her oversized hoodie up to her shoulder blades. I flinched violently, clapping a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. Her back. It wasn't skin anymore. From her waist up to her neck, the flesh was a horrific landscape of blackened, necrotic tissue. It looked like charred wood and rotting meat, cracked and oozing in places, spreading like a slow-moving plague across her body. It smelled faintly of the same decay that had come from Marco's wound. "Goddess," I whispered, tears springing to my eyes. She dropped her shirt and turned back to face me, her expression stark. "I am what you are, Liyah," she said, her voice hollow. "A healer, just like you." I shook my head, unable to process the horror. "But why? What happened to you?" She took a step closer, her eyes boring into mine. "I was used, just like they used you tonight. For years a pack held me, forcing me to heal their warriors, their sick, anyone they commanded. Day after day, draining me dry." She gestured to her own body. "This is the price. The goddess grants us this gift to use at her will, for our true mates and those she guides us to. When you force it, when you pour your life essence into those who are not meant to receive it, especially under duress, the magic turns, it corrupts." She tapped her temple with a bony finger. "The rot starts in the body, but it doesn't end there. It takes the mind too. The more you heal against the calling, the more you lose yourself." Her voice dropped to a terrifying whisper. "My memories began to fade a year ago. I forget names, places. Soon I won't remember who I was at all." I stared at her, the blood draining from my face. The threat wasn't just Dante killing me or my family. It was this. A slow, agonizing erasure of my body and soul, becoming a hollowed-out tool until there was nothing left but rot.
A chance to say, never spoke our truth, held back by pride, our hearts uncouth. The chance we missed, the night we met, now shadows linger with regret. Your eyes, they told 1,000 tales. The silence built these prison walls, unwritten letters lost in time, the echoes of our love gone blind. Unspoken words, they haunt our dreams, whispers of what might have been, silent cries lost in the wind, unspoken words, they cut within. A chance to speak was all we needed, but fear took hold, our hearts conceded, fading slow like distant stars, leaving behind these silent scars.